Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to the latest episode of the Hard Compound Live. I just said good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from. For those of you who don't know, my name's Rich, and I run and operate the Hard Compound. We're a one-stop shop for all things motorsport, whether it be IndyCar, F1, touring cars, bikes, rallying, NASCAR, all kinds of stuff. We try and cover it as best we can in the form of race reviews, race previews, articles, throwbacks, birthday posts, competitions, and all that kind of stuff. And we also provide online backing for the very best young drivers and riders here in the UK. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Search for the Hard Compound on any of those. Give us a give us a follow. Add the Hard Compound to your hashtags on Instagram, hit the notification bell on Twitter, subscribe to YouTube, and all that good stuff, because we've got lots of good content for you. And we do live interviews, as you might have noticed. These are all streamed live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and they're all instantly recorded. So head over to YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, go to the video section on Facebook, and check out all the interviews that we've done. Just going to throw a few names of people that we've spoken to. Just to whet your appetite a bit, even. From the British touring cars, you've spoken to a lot of drivers past and present, the likes like Tom Chilton and Jake Hill, Ollie Jackson, Rick Parfitt, Jade Edwards, Michael Crease. From the past, we've spoken to some past champions, the likes of Mr. Matt Neal, Steve Soper, Gabriele Tarquini, Rickard Rydell, Andy Prio, Anthony Reid, Tom Coronel, Rob Gravick. We've spoken to Dick Bennett, the boss of West Surrey Racing. Excuse me. We've also spoken to a number of drivers from F1 sports cars, the likes of Mr. Derek Warwick, Mr. David Brabham, Stefan Johansson, Carl Wendlinger recently, Alex Caffey, Mark Blundell. Just last week, we spoke with five-time Le Mans winner, Mr. Emanuele Pirro, which was fantastic. We've spoken with Mika Salo, Karen Chandhog, Eddie Cheever. And we've spoken to Jackie Ix and Mario Andretti, which was a real privilege on both counts. We've also, but tonight our guest is an IndyCar driver. We've spoken to a few of those as well. The likes of Ari Landijk, Willie T. Ribbs, Danny Sullivan, J.R. Hildebrand, Vincent James, Alex Palou, Brian Herter, Will Power, Al Unser Jr., many others. But tonight we have got someone who has gone from the seat to the microphone. Now a broadcaster with NBC. He's an IndyCar race winner. He's been successful in Indy Lights and all the Road to Indy series. So we're going to bring him in right now. Very nice chap. Bumped into him at the Indy 500 earlier this year. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mr. James Hinchcliffe.
Well, hello.
There we are. James, how you doing?
I'm very well, sir. Yourself?
Yes, very well. Very well. We were saying off air that we're quite warm, but yeah, we're all good. All good. No, as I said, it's good to see you again. Obviously, bumped into you completely by chance at the Indy 500. You were whizzing about on your scooter. So thank you for stopping and having a quick chat. Much appreciated.
Yeah, no, that was handy. I was glad that we managed to find each other. I was happy to hear that you were making the pilgrimage to Indy for the race, and very fortuitous that we found each other. As you have now seen in person, it's a pretty big place and a lot of people floating around.
Yeah, there's as you say, there's lots of people getting in people's way, but it was great, and I just saw you whizzing by. I thought, right, gotta grab him. So. And it was quite good that you remembered hearing from me. So yeah, thank you.
No, of course. Been looking forward to it for some time. We planned this one long in advance. We were joking about the both being fans of getting things on the books way down the road, so that way you can make sure it happens.
Yeah, I think we're about 3 months now, aren't we? I think we've been trying to get this over the line. So that's great, fantastic. Fantastic. Firstly, thank you to you for sparing some time, coming to have a chat with us about your career and IndyCar and what's happening. Certainly in the last couple of days, which we'll come to very shortly. Some controversial stuff going on. Just want to say hi to everyone in the comments. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Oliver Taylor, hello, Paul Ablett, Carol Reed, and all the other people tuning in. Do put some comments and questions in. We'll get to them as best we can. Ooh, hang on. I think we've lost some sound. We might have lost some sound. I'm just going to ramble for a moment until the sound comes back. That's fine. It's fine. Ben Perry, good evening. Big fan of IndyCar. Thank you for your support. We do have some other chats coming up soon, which we will come to very soon. We're just waiting for the sound to start working. This is the joy of going live. This doesn't happen on the recorded podcasts, so this is new.
Hear me now.
And there we go. There we are.
Hello. Test.
Yep, all good. The audio.
Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Oh man, I don't know how this has happened.
It's okay. We can definitely hear you. If anyone can put in the comments, can you hear me and James? That would be great. I don't think there's anything happening at this end, sound-wise. I'm just gonna change a few bits here. Speaker, headphones. If you're
You can hear me, but I can't hear you for some reason. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, I can do that. You saw my chat?
You can go out and come back.
I'll be right back. Sorry, all.
No problem. So it looks like it's just me for the moment. But yes, don't worry. He is coming back. This is what happens when we go live. We can't help it. And okay, we are back. Let's press the button. Can you hear me now?
Hello? No, still not working.
I can hear you. No, it's not working.
I can see that on this little thing on the side here. Hang on one sec.
I can't see anything else that's going on. It's okay. We're going to sort this out. Don't worry. But anyway, guys, I mentioned about the British Touring Car Championship. We have got a guest next week from the British Touring Car Championship. We're announcing that 8 p.m. UK tomorrow. So do tune in for that. And we have more British Touring Car Championship drivers. We've got a very famous name in motorsport joining us in a couple of weeks. And lots and lots of other good stuff going on besides. So, yeah, as I said in the intro, do head over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, give us a follow, and you won't miss out on anything. And here we go. We have celebrations.
We're back.
Yes.
Oh,
there we go.
What are the odds? We were chatting completely problem-free for 15 minutes, and then all of a sudden that happens right as we start. I apologize, everyone.
That's okay. It happens. It happens. I had a chat with one of the superbike riders here in the UK, and every sort of 5 minutes, it was a bit stormy where he was, and he just kept vanishing. But anyway, no problem at all. We're all good. Yes, fantastic. Ian Gordon, hello. So yes, just saying to everyone, put some comments in the comments bit, and we'll crack on. Anyway, yeah. Basically, before we start, I just want to say two things. One, I'm very jealous of you for two things. One, you've made a career out of motor racing, which is something I would have loved to have done when I was a kid. And two, this is about my kids. You have been on the Blippi Kids TV show, which is awesome.
I have.
If anyone's got kids, you'll know how good that is.
Yeah, it's so funny how that came about as well, because I had no idea who or what Blippi was. And,
right.
At the time I was driving for Andretti Autosport, and they sent a message to myself and Alexander Rossi, not known for necessarily being the most kind of like kid-friendly personality in the IndyCar paddock, God bless them. But they said, hey.
I'm glad you said that.
yeah, I can say that. So, so they sent us a message saying, hey, we're the only two that live in Indianapolis. They said this kids show, it's a YouTube show, it's coming in, they're doing a thing, would you guys be willing to help out? We both sort of said, yeah, sure, no problem. And that was probably 2 months out from when it was actually going to happen. The week before, I was back home in Canada for Canadian Thanksgiving, and I was visiting with my family, and my sister has a young girl, my niece, she's about 2. And they start playing this thing called Blippi. My mom can't go on enough about how Blippi drives her crazy, but it's like Kaylee's favorite thing. So, adored by kids, loathed by parents sort of thing. And I know I'd never heard of it, never knew anything about it. So I watched a few blippies with my niece. And then I get back to Indianapolis on Monday and I open my email like, okay, so tomorrow filming starts at 8:30. The blippy crew will be arriving earlier. And I was like, oh,
I got
okay.
it.
This is what we're doing. Now I understand, which means that I got to like get Blippy to do a little video for my niece, which makes me coolest uncle on earth for, I guess, at least the next 3 to 5.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. They're going to love that. But no, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with the whole Blippy thing. I mean, kids love it. Adults, it's great for the first kind of hour. But no, it was fantastic. No, it was very cool. When it came on, I was like, no way! I was more excited than my kid. So anyway, I digress. Very cool. But obviously we're here to talk about motorsport, so we'll leave the kid stuff to the kids. If I may, I'd like to go back right to the start, as we like always tend to do. You're from, as you know, as you said, you're from just outside Ontario, Canada. How did you first become interested in motorsports? Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, just outside Toronto. So I my motorsports love came from dad. So my dad was actually from a little town called Batley, just outside Leeds, and
That's where
being
my
out
mum's
being
from.
no way.
My mum's from Batley. That is so weird. And there's going to be a comment
That
in
is
a minute.
very weird.
There's a guy from Yorkshire who's going to write a comment in a minute. Anyway, sorry, I'm butting in.
Small world. You don't meet many
Yeah.
people from Batley or even who know
Yeah,
where
well,
Batley is.
Yeah.
So so dad grew up on Track Road in Batley, and
Wow.
and obviously just being a huge motorsports fan, growing up in the UK, and so he moved to Canada in the '70s, and when I was born, I'm the youngest of three, but I was kind of the only one of the kids that took an interest in it, and it was right from the word go. Some of my earliest memories of life were watching F1 races with dad in the morning, and then IndyCar races in the afternoon, and just I was an addict from a very early age. And the sort of running joke in the family is dad had a midlife crisis and bought a British vintage sports car and went racing in a
Wow.
series that is comprised largely of expat Brits who have midlife crises and buy British vintage sports cars and go racing. And so I thought this was the coolest thing ever, right? Dad was a race car driver, and I was just such a fan of the whole thing. We met a guy there who had a son that raced go-karts competitively, had no idea the world of competitive go-karting was even a thing. Went out, checked one of his races out one time, and that was it. I got a go-kart for my next birthday, which was my 9th, and we started racing.
Wow. That's cool. I think I'm approaching midlife crisis time. I think I might have to get involved.
Yeah, he is about 3 or 4 years away from where you are now. That's where it happened.
Oh, it's a slippery slope. But no, that's cool. That's a cool way to start. That's yeah, I love that. I still can't believe the Batley thing. That's amazing. Batley and June. Yeah. And there's the comment. There it is, Batley, guy from Huddersfield here. There we are. I knew that was coming. Thank you, Oliver. No, so you went racing with karting. Obviously, the bug bit pretty hard, which is always good to hear. Do you remember that first race, that first time you went racing, and when did you first think this is something I'd like to do?
It's so funny, man. Like I'll be honest. I'll be the first to admit I wasn't very good when I started. It took a lot of hard work. I wasn't one of those just sort of natural phenoms the first time I sat in a go-kart or anything like that. But I really did enjoy it. I remember doing it was sort of a training camp type day before my first race. I remember that very clearly. My first race itself, I can't say I remember a ton about. I do know that every race of my rookie season, I finished last, but I was last by a reduced amount every time, and so it was one of those things where, like, the first race where you weren't lapped by the leader, you're like, okay, this is progress. We're getting there. And I'll never forget halfway through that first season, finishing last every week. My dad one time said to me, he goes, if you don't enjoy this anymore, like, we can sell the go-kart. Don't worry about that. Like, we can do something else. And I was like, no, I'm going to get good at this. Wow. And just kept working at it. And so, yeah, it wasn't until my second season of karting that I finally started doing well and winning races and stuff. But yeah, it definitely took some effort.
Wow, I think that's fantastic, because there's so many kids, even people like now who are in racing, they get disheartened and walk away from it. And But in that young age, saying, okay, you weren't winning, but you were getting better, and you thought you're going to keep getting better, which I think is the best way to do it, isn't it? You learn on the job, and so you've kicked on, you've started getting some better results, and obviously that's a confidence booster and things like that. And I guess you then just started entering more series and moving up the ladder. And what were your successes in karting? Because I've done some research and I can't find much.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, so all of my karting was really done, first off, kind of just regionally in Ontario, and then the thing for me is when I started. Sorry, I sort of skipped over a previous part of your question, which was, when did I kind of really want to, decide I wanted to do this? And when I started racing go-karts, it was a hobby. I knew at 9 years old that being a racing driver wasn't a real job, and like people didn't actually get to do that. So it wasn't really ever an aspiration for me. It was something fun that I did, with my dad on weekends, and I was perfectly content with that. But the older that I became, you move up classes based on age and weight, and every time you move up, the class gets a little faster, a little more competitive, and every year I seem to do a bit better. And so in my head, it was simple math. I'm like, okay, well, if every time the car gets faster and the competition gets greater, I perform better, we should probably try to do this. And
Right.
it honestly wasn't until I was about 14 years old. So I'd been karting, 5 years, and there was a guy that ran a team, what was like sort of the North American pro karting tour, so to speak. And he said, hey, I think you could compete at this level. And that's now all kids that are trying to make a living being racing drivers, right? I mean, at the regional level, it's a lot of hobbyists, a lot of amateurs, whatever. These were the kids that were trying to make a career out of it, and started racing there, and did that for 2 years with honestly some success. But we really struggled because when you're up against kids that live in climates like Florida and California, where you can race 12 months a year, it's a bit difficult to compete when you're in a place where it's snowing 6 months of the year.
Sure.
So yeah, my real, breakthroughs, I don't think came until I actually got up into formula cars, and the playing field was leveled a little bit.
Right. Okay. So that's when it kind of started to take off a little bit, and that's what leads on nice. I mean, was it the Bridgestone Racing Academy? I've got that as
Yeah, that's right.
was that the next step? Obviously there's like loads of like race schools and things in the UK and in the States and all around the world, and I guess this was one of those type things. Was it was it based on previous results, or just could you just turn up and have a go, and based on the past? Or
Yeah, you could sort of just turn up and have a go. It was where you would go to get your race license, right? And
right,
then they also had a series. So it's school cars, it's all their equipment, it's at the same track. You just run it forwards or backwards sort of thing. And you do 3 races a weekend, and it's 4 weekends. It's, a pretty simple thing. And it was an interesting mix of, hobbyist sort of business people that couldn't afford to go racing but had a little bit of money and wanted to do something, and then drivers who were trying to kind of make a living eventually doing this, and trying to train themselves. I got special dispensation based on my karting record to start a year early. You're technically supposed to be 16. I got to do it for the first time at 15. And I remember I was up against kids they were 18, they were 19, much older than me. And I on my first weekend there, I ended up winning the race on Sunday. So technically the third race, but it was, the first weekend. And, I'm 15-year-old me up here, and there's these kids with a lot more experience that I beat. And I remember thinking, okay, maybe we do have something here. Like, this is maybe a possibility. And the guy that ran the school, and he actually still runs it, Brett Goodman, he liked making the joke as he announced me as the winner. He's like, and James Hinchcliffe, whose mom had to drive him here today. Thanks, Brett. Thanks.
like cheers for that.
Yeah.
My moment of triumph, and you've just
Yeah.
dipped it. Yeah.
Got to keep you humble, right? Got to keep you humble.
Yeah. Don't get carried away. That's cool. I mean, obviously you've gone there, you've done well, and that's, I guess, as you say, that's when it clicked, and you thought, you can do. You're beating the older kids, and I've got you came third overall, top rookie, and obviously a really good experience when you were there. Was it a big jump from the karts to the car, or was it because you hear some people have gone from one series to another from car, and they've just sort of taken to it. It's like it's just a bit bigger and a bit heavier. But was it a big jump?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of my first sort of 5 years of karting was all in four stroke karting,
Yeah.
and then I moved when I started doing the North American tour. We moved into 2-cycle stuff, primarily shifter karts.
Right.
And if you ever driven a shifter kart, I mean the performance of those things is incredible. I mean the power to weight ratio is probably second to like an IndyCar. Yeah, they're unbelievable. Physicality, all these things. And so when I first got into one of the school cars, which was the school car is a detuned 2-liter, so a USF 2000 kind of equivalent. So like basically a Formula Ford, and it runs on shredded tires and things like that. Everything was slow. Everything was so slow. It's coming out of a shifter kart. All your inputs had to be slower and smoother. Shifter karts they're brutal, they're raw, they're very aggressive. And so with the exception of the weight, like you felt this unbelievable weight of the car compared to a go-kart. You're going from 300-pound go-kart to 1,000, 1,200-pound race car, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That was a big change for sure. But it honestly took me back to my kind of opening stint karting in four-stroke, where a lot of it is about, power to weight ratio is a lot different. It's a lot lower horsepower. It's more about momentum, things like that. And I really do think that a lot of that kind of helped me when I got into that first school series, having done so much four-stroke racing.
Right. That's good. It's interesting that it was like the other way, because obviously your natural thought is, you're in a car, more power, it's going to be quicker, but it doesn't automatically mean more nimble, obviously. Just a question from Ian Gordon about moving to the UK and things like that. We're going to come to that shortly, Ian. I've also just seen a question from Chuck Decker, and I believe that is Natalie Decker's father, or a relative of Natalie Decker. I might be wrong, but anyway, Chuck, hello, thank you for your question. Just asking where you grew up, obviously around Ontario. Yeah, so basically Canadian. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, you've got that time in the cart. Sorry, in the car under your belt, and then you moved up. I've got it. I mean, you basically went up a series almost every year. I mean, the next step was the Formula BMW USA. Was that on the back of what you did in the academy? Had someone taken notice, or were you just put in touch with someone? Or
that one's one of the funnier stories of kind of my junior career. Is so I had signed after the Bridgestone Racing Academy. I had signed up to do the Formula Ford 1600 Canadian series, which was at the time and still is. It's a pretty strong series. There's a lot of good Ford racing up in Canada. A lot of good drivers, guys like Paul Tracy and Scott Goodyear and all these guys had come through. Greg Moore, they'd all come through that class. So it was kind of the next logical step for me. And the team I had signed up with got this email one day from BMW Motorsports saying, hey, we're starting a Formula BMW category in North America. They already existed in Germany, England, and Asia at the time.
Yeah.
And we're opening up for, they were basically being recruited as a team. They said, hey, would you like to start a team in this? But they also said, we have this shootout happening for 24 drivers. We're going to take applications. We're going to choose 24 kids. We're going to take them over to Valencia, Spain, the F1 track.
Wow.
And we're going to drive around the cars, 3 days of media assessment, fitness assessment, time in the cars, whatever. And then we're going to award 6 of them essentially a scholarship to run Formula BMW.
Right.
So the guys that I was supposed to be running 1600 with said, well, hey, we got this email. This is a cool opportunity. It'd be great to just get some seat time in something else for a couple of days in the off season, because it was happening in like January or something.
Sure.
Nobody really thought of it as like hey, like, let's go and try to win one of these things. It's more like, hey, let's submit something and maybe we'll be lucky enough to even get to go and drive the car, sort of thing.
Sure.
So I submitted a resume, and I think they got 300 or something applications, and I was one of the 20 who were selected. So that was like the coolest thing ever. And like at that point, my dad and I are like, all right, so this is where, like, I'm 17. I'm like, okay, so this is where my life tops, right? I peak at 17, getting to fly to Spain and drive this cool, monocoque carbon fiber race car with BMW Motorsport support, whatever.
Wow.
And so we go and we do this 3-day shootout with a bunch of young drivers. And long story short, we end up winning one of the scholarships to compete in Formula BMW that following season.
Wow.
So we went back to my team and we're like, well, hey, did you guys want to start one of these teams? Because now we've got this money to do this, we might as well do it. So we kind of sidelined the 1600 plans and impromptu started a Formula BMW team instead and went racing.
Wow, I love that. There was like no plan at all. It just kind of all just came together, and wow,
right place, right time.
Fantastic. I love that, because I mean that's the thing, isn't it? It's you can work at motorsport, and of course you have to, securing backing and knowing the right people, but there's a lot to be said for being in the right place at the right time. We've heard it so many times, and that definitely feels like one of those moments. I mean, again, a good year, just like you had in the academy. Again, you took like 3 wins overall, got Rookie of the Year, and obviously kind of a strange symmetry with what happened in the academy. And I guess it was just racing around like the US and Canada, was it, in various, just in
everything was US and Canada. We followed a lot of IndyCar races were our main series that we supported. We supported the F1 race in Montreal, which was pretty special. But yeah, that's basically how that worked.
Yeah, cool. So almost like a support series for the IndyCar.
Yeah.
And it was because, and I guess these were like wing cars with downforce, things like that. Was that another step? Because I've heard so many people say that sometimes they struggled with it, or they took to the wing cars much better than others, or some struggled with it. Or how was it for you when you first got in one?
Yeah, it was definitely different. For me, it was the first time I'd done anything with a slick tire in a car, and obviously the downforce on the Formula BMW car wasn't tremendous. I think it was very much built as a training tool, as that sort of entry level, step from karting into Formula cars. So it was, mechanically grip was definitely where it came from. It was lower horsepower. But yeah, I mean, technology wise, it was a lot more to it. You're working with an engineer, you're looking at data, trying to understand how that works, understand how the car works. And, for me, I had won a test day in a Formula Renault 2.0 car. And that's got significantly more downforce than the Formula BMW car had. And I remember that kind of being a light bulb moment for me. There was this particularly quick corner in this track that I was testing at, and it was like, yeah, the faster you went through it, the better the car felt. And that was just
Right.
it was such a difficult thing to wrap your head around, as a civilian, as a normal person who had never experienced this before, this phenomenon. But no, it clicked pretty quick once you got to that point, and you there's a few key moments. I remember that one. I did a test in the BMW car where I remember the corner on the lap that I discovered like really how trail braking worked and keeping the weight, controlling the weight with the brake pedal. And there were sort of a few kind of pivotal moments over that year, call it 12-month period, where certain sort of racing physics and vehicle dynamics lessons got just laid out in front of me. And I'm like, that's how that works.
Yeah. And again, just things that click through the year and you can take on, take on going forward. That's cool. Love that. Jim McKendrick said he's driven a Formula Renault car around Cadwell Park here in the UK from that era. Very quick car.
Yeah.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
He also said, were there any other well-known or now well-known drivers in that series at the time, the BMW series? Were there any that have gone on?
Yeah,
I've got a list of some that came through. I mean, we've had Sebastian Vettel, Nico Rosberg's come through. Hulkenberg,
I've heard of them.
Robert Wickens, Felipe Nasr. These guys have come through, haven't they? So.
Yeah, no. So the guys that were there my year, so the US series produced quite a few guys over its tenure, but my year guys that stood out. So Andreas Wirth won the championship that year. He's still racing, touring cars in Germany. He did an IndyCar race or two, off the back of a few more years in the US. Graham Rahal was in the series that year. He's doing okay.
I think I've heard of him. Yeah.
Yeah. Tommy Milner, who's gone on to incredible sports car success,
Yeah.
factory Corvette driver.
Wow.
Billy Johnson's done a lot in sports cars here in the States and some stock car stuff as well. So yeah, there was a few good drivers that came out of it for sure. And honestly, like tale as old as time, a bunch of drivers that had potential to be, very great and have great careers that for whatever reason the timing didn't work out. And yeah, so unfortunate for some of those guys, but it was great. It was great.
Yeah. Again, that's the flip side of not being in the right place at the right time or not getting the break at the time. It's just the way it goes sometimes. Unfortunately. So yeah, we obviously done well in that series, and again moving up again. Yeah, the next two steps. Just fast forward a bit. I mean, you've gone from up to the Star Mazda series, and then Toyota Atlantic. I mean, this is again, it's sort of similar cars but different. Just like more like learning curves to them, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, basically every step in the ladder is, I kind of give it the 20% rule. The car is 20% bigger. It's got 20% more power, 20% more downforce, 20% better brakes. And whether, I mean, nowadays in the US, they have, the road to Indy. It's a very organized, mapped out sort of program. It's brilliant. I really wish it existed when I was racing because it did not. And every winter it was like a bit of a lottery on what you thought was going to be the most competitive field to race in the next year.
When I was
But
going to say,
even
spoke
back,
with Dalton Bellett about 3 weeks ago, and he came through that, and he can't speak highly enough of it. He absolutely loves it. I think Jay Hildebrand was the same. Just
yeah,
superb route, superb.
so great how they've structured it, and he's great for young drivers, and that's why I think we're seeing a lot of influx of European drivers, of Asian drivers, people coming over trying to make it work. But so in my era, whether, like I said, whether it was by accident or by design, the cars seem to sort of be built in that 20% rule. And even going from an Indy Lights car to an Indy car for the first time, even that jump was just that same sort of 20% progression.
Right.
And I think that's why you see so many drivers can come out of Lights, today, and in the right situation be pretty quickly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, almost like straight off the bat. I mean, just off the top of my head, we've got like Carl Kirkwood this year. I mean, he's just come in and he's been very impressive. David Malukas as well. The guys.
2 Firestone Fast Sixes for Malukas in his rookie season. Unbelievable. You go back to what Pato O'Ward did, his very first IndyCar race, he made it in a Fast Six. Colton Herta, there's a lot of good drivers are coming out of that series right now because I think it's a very natural progression.
Yeah, and it just goes to show that if there's a structure in place, that you can just build and then build and build again. If there's a bit of funding and a bit of just it's so much better. It's just the best way to do it. I mean, you've got F1. If you don't have money, you've got no chance, and that's basically the bottom line. Whereas it feels like it's much more of like a racer's route rather than if you've got a big wallet.
The big difference, the big difference is, don't get me wrong, money still talks, but the big difference is that the champion from each category gets the scholarship to move up to the next category. Yeah. So if you're winning, you're rewarded. Now, the downside of that is you could drive well enough to win a championship and have things completely out of your control, take that away from you, and you get nothing. And that part sucks, but that's kind of how it is in Europe. Unless you basically have one of the difference in Europe is the manufacturers get involved in driver development a lot more than it happens over here. Very few IndyCar teams, if any, have contracts with young drivers, have driver development deals, are helping support drivers through the ladder. Whereas, in Europe, you look at the top 5 in F2, I bet every single one of them has an F1 development deal, and that's kind of helping, lead the way.
Yeah, it's like whether it be Mercedes or Red Bull or Alpine or whatever it might be, there's always that link. And it's just disappointing that obviously there's only so many seats on the grid, of course. And you can't just, just because you're there, you can't just jump into F1, obviously. But it is disappointing that some don't get the chance in IndyCar, but in F1. But it's great that the likes of like Callum Eilert from these shores, who's been able to go and have a really good crack at IndyCar this year. And you got Marcus Ericsson's gone over. I mean, he did something a few weeks ago, didn't he? Forget what it was. And even like Romain Grosjean at his age, he's 10 years younger than me. But anyway, but there's that opportunity to go to IndyCar and to do well because it just feels more I don't know, driver friendly, I guess, rather than, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean,
It
the
feels like you
parity
want
at
to
the
get tied
top is
for a
up
team when
is
you get stuck in F1, maybe.
yeah, for sure, and like there are so many situations, in F1 where a very talented driver is stuck in not a spectacular car, and if the right situations don't present themselves to show that talent, and like you say, if there's only so many seats open, right?
Yeah,
It's such a challenge. I mean, it's one of the most difficult sports on earth to break into,
yeah,
and then as a result to keep your place in, because there's always a lineup of young drivers that want to take it. But no, I mean that's what's great about IndyCar. Just the parity between the cars and the teams makes it a little more heavily reliant on driver ability and team preparation to get the result.
yeah. Which personally, I'm old school. I think that's the way it should be.
Sounds more fun.
Absolutely, definitely. Ben Perry just said in IndyCar, it always seems like anyone can win, even from low down on the grid. Exactly. I mean, look at Will Power the other week. Was it Mid Ohio? He spun and was at the back and came thumping through and took the third. And
Yeah,
yeah, just
he was last at the end of lap one and
yeah,
damn near won the thing.
yeah. I spoke to Will at the end of last year, and God, I said there's a few people within motorsport that I'd love to go to the pub and have a couple of drinks with, and he's one.
Yeah, he's funny, dude.
Yeah, he's someone else. Also, IndyCar is also highly fan friendly as well as driver friendly. Appreciates the audience. Yeah, I mean, I found that just through the hard compound. I mean, you guys, you're always so approachable, and you know, and you agreed to do stuff like this, which is great. Tried doing this with Lando Norris, no chance, because they're just you can't get near them.
Right.
But that's just the way it is. Anyway, yeah, got a bit sideways. So in the Toyota Atlantic series, this is a series that I sort of always used to sort of try and tune into and keep track of, which wasn't always easy 15 years ago. But it was the likes of like Jacques Villeneuve, Michael Andretti have come through it, Scott Goodyear, Mark Dismore, Patrick Carpentier, AJ Allmendinger, who's also doing very well in NASCAR, Simon Pagenaud. They've all come through that series, haven't they, as winners or done very well. And again, it's just that progression from doing well gets you rewarded. But you were in that series with like Forsyth Racing, obviously quite a big name. Did it feel like a big deal at the time getting with like Forsyth, because they've been around for a while? And
Yeah, I mean it was huge because Forsyth in particular had a habit of nurturing young Canadian talent. Greg Moore, Jacques Villeneuve, Carpentier, Tagliani, Paul Tracy, they'd all driven for
wow,
Jerry. And so when in 2006 they had announced the new car, the Swift 016, and it was the first time, this was sort of the genesis of this Road to Indy program. It was the first time that the series put up a prize of a ride in an Indy car the following year. Now,
right,
the nomenclature is a bit different because this was pre-split. So technically, Atlantic supported the Champ Car series. IndyCar was IRL at the time, very kind of different form of racing. But that was really the first time. So all of a sudden, they went from sort of struggling to fill the field, in Atlantic in 03, 04, 05. And now all of a sudden, I think we showed up to the first race with like 26 cars because there was now this allure of, if I win the championship, I'm going to be a Champ Car driver. And I got to do it. I was brought on by one of the best teams in Champ Car at the time that had this, habit of supporting young Canadian drivers. And yeah, it was a huge deal, man. It was the coolest thing. It was actually AJ Allmendinger and Paul Tracy who were driving for the Champ Car team at the time, the Forsyth Champ Car team. So they were kind of my teammates, as was Andreas Wirth, who was my old sparring partner from Formula BMW. But no, it was a really, really cool time kind of in my education as a racing driver, getting to compete in that series with that crowd.
yeah, fantastic, wow. And so you got the race win at Portland. That must have been pretty cool for that team in that series with what was not at stake or what was possible afterwards. To get the race win, you must have thought, oh, yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
Yeah, I mean, at that level, if you're winning at that level, that's the kind of the first sign to the big teams, and the team owners in the big series that you might have what it takes to move up. So that was special for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. Around that time as well, you spent a couple of seasons, just to step sideways a bit, in the A1 GP series. Now, I love this. I thought it was
Yeah.
great. It was like a World Cup of motorsport, and it had a lot of promise. It didn't quite take off, but how did that come about? Was it just was it an opportunity that was there? Because was there anything else like on your side of the pond exclusively that was available, or was it just something that came up at the time?
It just sort of came up, obviously, A1, man, it was the best. It was the best series. It was so much fun. The racing was so good. The philosophy, the concept was brilliant. It's
Absolutely.
such a tragedy that one didn't work out, but
Yeah.
yeah. So obviously, the way that series worked, you had to be from the nation whose team it was to drive, and I was making some weight. That Portland win was probably something that actually helped put my name on the radar,
Right.
and I got a call a few weeks later from a member of that team. They were heading into season two. They ran season one with a driver called Sean McIntosh from Western Canada, who'd been doing some F3 stuff over in Europe. So he did season one. And again, there were so many brilliant things about that series, but one of them was the fact that it ran in the traditional off season, right? So a lot of
Right.
drivers could do that series as well as whatever else they were doing.
Sure.
And so yeah, at the conclusion of the Atlantic season that year, they brought me in to be a teammate essentially to Sean. So it's one car, but you can switch drivers. It's the car, the team gets the points, not the driver. So they would
Right.
sort of alternate. One week with Sean's race, and the next week with my race, and on and on. And man, it was a blast.
Oh, everyone I've ever spoken to speaks so highly of it, whether it be from the fans, from the drivers, anyone inside or outside the ropes. It was, yeah, I just thought it was great. And as you say, it was such a great idea and a great format. I do remember a huge accident though at Brands Hatch. Still makes me wince now. The car flipped up and hit the brittle. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it was Khalil Bashir, I believe.
yeah, I think it hit the back and oof, yeah, awful.
Yeah.
But I'm just on that. Whenever we speak to guys from over your side of the pond, Brands Hatch always comes up. I think everyone who's driven in a car in America has driven at Brands Hatch at some point. Even if they're not a racing driver, even if it's like a taxi driver, they've ended up at Brands Hatch somehow. I love it. I mean, it's only about an hour and a half away from me here. Just wondering what your thoughts are on Brands Hatch, especially like the Grand Prix loop, because I love it.
It's so cool, man. It's so unique. The corner geometries and the mid corner elevation changes, things like that. I mean, you couldn't build a track like that today. They wouldn't let you.
No,
It's too unique. It's got too much character for modern day track designers, which I hate. I mean, I love the Brands Hatches of the world, the Spas, the Mo
yeah,
Sports, the Lagunas, the Road Americas. These old classic permanent road courses, just amazing. But yeah, I'm very fortunate. I got the chance to race at Brands there because that was special. It was a fun place.
yeah. And you've just named like my favorite circuits of all time. So we're on the same page. Definitely agree. Um, I go to Brands Hatch 3 or 4 times a year, and Paddock Hill Bend. Every time I walk down it, I still think this is ridiculous. Even though I've been there 100 times, the steepness of that corner still, it's just mad. And you see bike racing, it's like, what are you doing going down there on a bike?
I
Man,
don't know what you do going on any racetrack on a bike. that's
valid point.
but
I
that's
love
just
the bike
me.
racing, but you
Yeah.
wouldn't get me on one. Crazy. No, that's cool. Everyone loves Brands Hatch. The run continues. Um, just very quickly, A1 GP. I remember you came second in a sprint race. Was it in the Czech Republic? I think it was. And then
Yes.
and
Yeah.
then you were leading the feature race. And they were saying,
That's
"Oh,
right.
I'm going to do all that." And there was an incident with Alex Young.
It
Um,
was.
what happened there? I just from that little look on your face for a split second, you looked a bit annoyed.
No, it's funny, man. I look back on my career and there's maybe you can count on one hand the number of races that you still lose sleep over, but that's one of them for sure.
I'm sorry to
Uh,
bring it up.
no, hey, it's all part of it. Yeah, we did a great job on strategy. We had a good start, and then did a great job on strategy. Ran some really good laps. Got into the lead after the pit stop. but he was quicker. There's no doubt about it. And he was kind of just slowly picking away. And, we got down to, I think it was something in the single digits laps to go. And I was just trying absolutely everything I could. I was the most defensive driving I think I've ever done, still to this day. And yeah, I was making it so difficult for him. He tried to move in a corner that is not really a passing corner, and there was contact, and we went around. But it was, it was unfortunate, but you chalk it up to experience.
Yeah, it happens in racing, and we have to move on.
Yeah.
Just very quickly, at the end of that time, obviously, you said it was a very enjoyable time. Were there any opportunities in Europe or like globally or in the UK, which goes back to the question that Ian asked, or were you still focused on going sort of back home, as it were?
Yeah, at that point, the focus was back home. My European opportunity, my UK opportunity came after my Formula BMW season. I finished second in the championship, won Rookie of the Year. Andreas won, but he had been running the series over in Germany, I think, for a year or two. And so BMW actually offered me a ride in the UK series the following year. At that point, that was still a big part of their driver development program. As you said, Vettel, Rosberg, all those guys came through. But I was 17. I guess I would have been 18. My parents always placed a really big importance on education.
Sure.
At that point, you can understand you're still basically at the first level. You're at the entry level of open wheel car racing, and to give everything else up at that point is a huge risk. You're still so far away from being a professional racing driver.
Sure.
And they just weren't comfortable with me, dropping out of school, moving to the UK. I think the moving part wasn't really the issue. It was just, dropping out of school and just kind of doing this. It seemed premature. And so that was kind of an easy decision. It wasn't really mine to make. And but I get it, and I don't disagree. And so we kind of kept our focus over here in North America, and I'm glad we did, because it obviously worked out.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's important. I mean, again, I said I spoke to Dalton Kellett 3-4 weeks ago, and he said the same thing. He had an opportunity to go and do something else, but he thought, do the education, do the school, have a fallback in case, I think his words, in case the highly likely event that it doesn't work out, because obviously there's never any guarantee. So yeah, no, that's fair enough. 2009 we're up to now. In Indy Lights, this is sort of getting serious. It's the one below, and with Sam Schmidt Motorsports. Obviously, we know about Sam and what happened with him. I've not met the guy, I've not spoken to him, but from what I can gather, he's a pretty amazing guy to go through what he's done and still set a team up and do what he's done. It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, inspirational in a lot of ways, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, what happened to him was tragic. Is very, very, unfortunate. You talk about right place, right time to get into this sport. He was wrong place, wrong time. And it's really unfortunate, but he's put a lot of time and energy into raising money to, help build facilities and, help other people in similar situations. And so certainly from the philanthropic side, what he's done cannot be ignored.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's done quite well on the motorsport side as well. I mean, obviously you signed to his team in Indy Lights, and I mean, again, was that something that had been spoken about for a while, or was it just something that came up?
Well, that was an interesting sort of transition year, because in the Champ Car IRL war, the open wheel split, I was on the Champ Car side, and I had done the Atlantic series with hopes of going Champ Car racing. 2008, global financial crisis, everybody's suffering. Champ Car folds, the two series merge, and basically all of the time I had spent in Atlantic almost didn't count for anything anymore in the IndyCar world. And so I had to sort of laterally step to Indy Lights and learn those cars, learn those tracks, learn oval racing, which I'd never really done. And so it was very tough. It was very tough because we had sort of committed to the one side, several years prior. We had opportunities to do Indy Lights earlier, and we always said no. That was, a bad move on me and my dad's part, because we were just doing it on our own. We didn't have an agent or anyone else that we could really talk to about it. And, it's what we did. So we had to do lights in '09, which was difficult because, again, I had no stock in Indy Lights. Everything was on the Champ Car side. '09 was also a terrible time to be looking for sponsors. It was a very, very difficult year, but we knew it's what we had to do, and we did what we had to do to beg, borrow, steal, whatever it was to put the season together and kind of start off on the IndyCar path.
Yeah. And I mean, and it didn't go too badly. I mean, you came 5th overall in that series, which, given, the switch you had to make and learning the car, as you alluded to, that's a pretty good result. Had a few podiums and.
Yeah, that year the Andretti team was pretty dominant, and so like one of my teammates was Wade Cunningham, who was a multi-time Indy Lights champion and multi-time Freedom 100 winner, and I think he only finished 4th in the championship. So I was kind of basing myself off him. I learned a lot from him. He's still a good friend to this day. But yeah, I think we were up against it a little bit that year, and I was, like you said, I was still learning a lot as well.
Yeah. So I mean, on paper it's like, 5th, but you think, well, given the dominant team that was there as well, it's a pretty good outcome. He switched to Team Moore Racing the following year. They, don't mind me saying, they hadn't sort of set the world alight. They weren't known as being like a real front running team, but that was until James Hinchcliffe got behind the wheel. That went pretty well, didn't it? I mean, what was the thinking behind the move? Because on paper, you think, oh, okay.
Yeah, why would you leave the team that had won more races and championships and lights than the rest combined for a team that had maybe, I think, won one race in its entire career? There were some things at Sam Schmidt Motorsports that that I didn't love, just things that I didn't jive with, and I think it was known, certainly before the end of the year, that we weren't going to return there. It was just a function of what do you do, because we couldn't afford to drive with the Andretti team, who had been a little more dominant at the time, but I didn't want to stay where I was. Right. So I went about taking my whatever years of experience that I'd amassed, and Mark Moore approached me, and I said, yeah, look, if we can do it my way, then let's do it. And we went out and got the mechanics that I wanted, the engineer that I wanted. We got a lot of support from Mark's partner at the time in the team, and we put together this little team, and it was kind of the for me the real sort of light bulb moment of racing is not about cars or engines or tires, it's about people. And if you get the right group of people together, you can overcome budget deficits, you can overcome resource deficits, personnel, whatever it is, if that right group, is meshing. And I just took people I'd worked with in the past in various times in my career that I thought we would get along, put us all together, and we damn near won the championship.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that's, I just love that line. It's about the people. The people you work with, and the expertise and the know-how, and how you gel together. And as you say, you almost won the championship. Jean-Carl Vernet, who's out in World Touring Cars, won it that year. But you took 3 wins I've got here. And do you think that coming second that year in the team that you were in, did you think that kind of got you more noticed, perhaps, than even the champion, perhaps? Because I guess at the start of the season, people are thinking, well, that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, if a Haas is finishing on the podium every week, you're gonna think, all right, what's that guy doing? But no, I mean, it's funny. We talked about those races that you still think about. There's one in that season as well that I still think about that would have been the difference between us winning the title or not. And I guess, at the end of the day, it was enough to get the attention from the right people that got us an IndyCar test and sort of led to things down the road. But I think that was probably part of it. We took a team that hadn't really had that sort of success, and we did it ourselves.
Yeah, which was amazing. I mean, even now you look back at it and you think, oh, that was seriously impressive. I mean, I must admit, that was when I first sort of heard of you regularly, was in that year, saying, oh, it's this guy in Indy Lights, and he's just he's challenging for the title, which is amazing. Following year, obviously into IndyCar, and what a name to go with. Newman House Racing. I mean, that's a pretty it's a pretty good place to start. Obviously, they've had both one of the many Andretti's, Mario and Michael, and obviously from Nigel Mansell from over this side, and so many other drivers. A huge name. Was it sort of nerve-wracking when you went in there? You think, obviously, I guess it's exciting that you're an IndyCar driver, but then you think, blimey, I'm with this
Yeah,
team.
it was terrifying. It was terrifying. I don't think it mattered. I think it would have mattered what team it was, but certainly to have a team with that sort of pedigree was remarkable. And the season almost didn't happen. We did a test together after the light season. They said they had signed Royal Serbia. They wanted a rookie to be his teammate. Royal, I think, had already done 8 years or something in IndyCar, whatever it was, and they gave me a pretty strong interview about, why should we test you? And, you didn't win the championship. Why shouldn't we test the other guy? And I was like, you should test us both, whatever. So they ended up giving me a test. And by the end of the 2 days, a 2-day test, by the end of the second day, I was actually quicker than Royal. And
Wow.
So they said, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to offer you a deal. We don't have a sponsor yet, but now that we know who the driver is, there's a chicken and egg thing with sponsorship sometimes. And I'm like, yeah, you're Newman Haas. You're 7-time champions. Like, you're going to figure that. Like, I was not worried about it at that point. And that was in December. And then we had a date by which we had to have money in the bank to make the first race in St. Pete. And try as they did, that date came and that date went, and we had no money.
Right. That was
and
the reason.
So, right. So I didn't make the first race of the season in St. Pete. And I kind of went there thinking, I guess I'm done. I guess it wasn't meant to be, because I did everything that I had to do to get this opportunity. I performed on the day where I had my test. I executed, and we tried everything to find money, everything, and we just didn't find it. And the sort of unknown part of the story is, when I decided to drop out of school to pursue racing, it was a bit of a conversation with my parents, and I made a deal with them. I'd gone to my school, explained my situation, and they gave me a 5-year deferral. They're like, yeah, come back anytime. The next 5 years, you can pick up where you left off. So my parents said, cool, you get 5 years to make it as a professional driver, or you're going back to school.
Wow.
So we're now in St. Pete, which is March, April. That following September was the end of my 5 years.
Wow.
And so, yeah, when I joined the Atlantic Series, right, in 2006, that was the start of it. And now here we were in 2011. And I was like, okay, so I guess this isn't happening. I'll enjoy my summer traveling around with the team, because I was still part of the team. I was under contract, but, unless Oriole got hurt or quit, it wasn't going to be, and then the Saturday night of the St. Pete race, one of the people we've been talking to about sponsorship called up and said, okay, we're in. When can we get a car on track? And then we ended up making our debut the next race at Barber.
Wow, that's amazing! It was that close to being finished, and wow, well done to the person on that phone call.
Yeah, Eric Sprott, we'll love him forever.
Wow, that's amazing. That can hinge on that. Yeah, I'd say in just your second race, the third race of the season, you came 4th at Long Beach. I got that in there, and then you had 4th at Kentucky, 4th at New Hampshire. So you were on the pace, in patches. Were you happy with that first season, the way it went? Obviously, it was a relief to be driving, of course, but were you happy with it that first year?
Yeah, thrilled. My first race, I qualified 8th right next to Dario Franchitti, and I just couldn't believe it. Dario had been kind of a mentor to me through Indy Lights. We had a sponsor that was mutual, and we did a bunch of events together, so I kind of knew him pretty well. And he was Dario, and the first race, to see my car sat on the grid next to his car, I was like, this is not right, man. This is just, wow. I shouldn't be here. And we started late, but it was a really strong rookie year. We had, like James Jakes was a rookie that year, Anna Beatrice, J.R. Hildebrand. It was like a fairly strong rookie field. And honestly, rookie of the year is the only thing you get one crack at, right? And I was super proud that we won that, because we did start, a race late, and JR had that, sort of infamous second place finish at the Indy 500, which is a race that I crashed out of. So, I'm finishing near the back. He finished second. The point spread after May was pretty phenomenal, considering I missed one race and then had that happen.
Of course.
and for us to just sort of fight back together. And we didn't even have funding for the whole season. When we started, it was only supposed to get us through the Toronto race.
Wow.
And we sort of pieced it all together. You know, Bernie Haas was a huge part of that, and keeping me in the car. And the fact that we were able to secure that finally in the last race of the season, we finally passed it. I think the second last race we passed them, and then, you know, we were able to hang on to it in the last race there. And or the last race ended up not counting, sorry, because of, unfortunately, what happened with Dan.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was you know, it was a great first season. I was happy to have, you know, I led laps at road courses. I at least had top fives on a short oval, a super speedway, a street course. It was pretty cool season.
Yeah, very cool. And as you say, you know, you only get one shot at Rookie of the Year, and you'll always be Rookie of the Year, which is cool.
Yeah.
Just again, you know, we spoke about Indy 500. It was your first one that year, 2011. Obviously, we know what happened with JR on the last corner, just bad luck. I mean, I spoke with him, and he's just always been very philosophical about it. He's like, well, I knew it was going to happen as soon as I came up on the slower car, so it is what it is. Which I'm not sure I could be like that, but anyway. But I mean, what was it like being inside the ramp? Your first Indy 500, the crowd's there, the build-up. The first time must be amazing. I mean, it was pretty amazing for me just watching the thing. But to be, you know, knowing you're going to be involved that day when you wake up, it must be a very cool feeling.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. So I've been watching the Indy 500, you know, my whole life as a fan. And then I attended my first one in 2008, and I was like, oh man, I didn't get this race at all until you see it. Like, okay, now I get it.
It's not until you're
And then
there.
in 2000, right. And then in 2009, I was in Indy Lights. And so we raced on Carb Day, the Friday before the race, what traditionally was the Freedom 100. Roger Penske's killed that one for some reason, which I don't agree with, but that's just me. So I got to be kind of part of the event even. And I was like, oh man, I thought last year I got it. I'm like, no, now being part of something, now I get it. And then even after that, you know, then I'm like, no, then you're actually in the show. You're like, oh, okay, no, even when I was in Lights, I didn't get it. Now I understand, right? Like, you hear all these videos, you see all these clips, these interviews, whatever, of drivers just waxing poetic about the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Indy 500. And at some point you're like, come on, guys. Like, this is too much. It's all of you, and it lays it on so thick. It cannot, it is. Yep. I was like one of the people criticizing, you know, I won't say his name, but there was a driver that I remember seeing this one interview with before I'd ever been part of Indy. And I'm like, you're not from the States. You never watched it growing up. Like, everything you're saying is you're lying. Like, you're throwing it on for the show, and I don't appreciate it. It's not honest. It's all manufactured. And then you get there, man, and you do it, and you're like, damn it, they're right. Something about this place, man. It's God, it's special.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, I've been building it up in my head. We were supposed to go last year, and we didn't. Obviously, COVID. We were supposed to go just as fans, you know, just sitting down and watching. And I was worried that I built it up so much in my head that it was going to be a letdown, and it wasn't.
Could never.
No, yeah. I think I cried 3 times on race day. I was like, I can't believe it. It's something. It's just incredible. It's amazing. So to be involved in it, you know, as a driver, I just can't imagine. Wow. Very quickly that year, we mentioned about Dan Weldon, obviously a Brit. Very proud of him. It's amazing how many people still don't know about him here in the UK, double Indy 500 winner. Obviously, I've spoken to Will, who was in the race, and JR, who was in the race, and I don't really want to dwell on it too long, but yeah, just your thoughts on Dan. I mean, obviously, I guess you didn't know him super well, but yeah, it's a real sad loss. Just one of those really unfortunate incidents, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel lucky because, you know, he was full-time in IndyCar when I was in Lights. And so we still had a couple interactions at the track, things like that. And then in 2011, he was on that partial season, but he was doing, you know, IndyCar broadcasting. So we saw him at the track. We heard about him, you know, heard from him a lot. And yeah, he was just such a bright light, man. He was just always full of life. He was the energy in every room that he walked into, you know, and I think I think I went into my rookie season honestly believing at the time that the cars and the tracks and the safety had come so far
Yeah,
that I never expected to lose a friend doing this
sure.
genuinely. And again, I was 24 or whatever. I was naive. Um, and so the fact that it happened in my first season was like a really big eye opener for me.
I'm sure.
That whole weekend was very bizarre. It was
Mm.
it something felt off from the minute we got there. It really did. I hate it's again. It sounds so cliche. You hear these stories of, oh, I had this feeling or whatever. But man, that one for me really was that. And
Yeah, yeah,
there's so many things I wish we could have and would have done differently. But he was, like I said, he was a super special guy, and I've stayed pretty close with his family. Susie still and her boys are pretty active in the world, and Holly, his sister, has always been a big supporter of mine, and I've always just loved her to death, and she's kind of like my little sister. So yeah, that was a tough one for the whole sport. I mean, you never, there's never a good time to lose a driver or anyone that deserves that fate. And for us to lose Dan that way was tough for sure.
yeah, absolutely. I can remember wanting to watch the race, but being exhausted because it was like 10 o'clock at night, wherever it was, UK time. And I woke up and saw the headlines, and I don't remember much of that morning. I remember thinking, oh my God. So yeah, real sad, but very good to see that his boys are now with Andretti as part of the young driver development kind of scheme,
Yeah, man, they're crushing it. They're doing great.
which is awesome. And as you said, they've been doing very well. Which obviously brings us on to your next move to Andretti. I mean, you were there for what, 3-4 years, and one of my favourite liveries, the GoDaddy one, the GoDaddy green with Andretti. Yeah, just very very cool, very very cool car, cool livery, big name. Was it just something that became available at the time? And obviously Andretti's huge name, something you kind of jumped at, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, so the honest story is, and it's been publicized. People know that Dan had actually signed to drive that car the morning of that race. And that combined with Newman Haas, when the year ended and said, "Yeah, we loved what you did. We want you back." And then in December, they came to me. They're like, "You know what? We've decided that we're out of racing," which was a huge blow. I mean, we didn't. I don't think anybody ever anticipated seeing that name fall out of motorsports. It's just such an iconic name. That team had done so much, but they made that decision, and so I was sort of left without a job. And I never in a million years, as a kid coming off his first year in the series, would have thought that Michael Andretti even knew who I was. Never mind, had me on a short list for what was now that car. And I went through a bunch of different things. I got a call one day from kind of his right hand man, JF Thorman, and I was told that I was being considered for that ride. And long story short, went through a bunch of different stuff and ended up landing the gig, which was, I mean, it was quite literally a career saver, because by the time Newman Haas had gone under, I mean, it was December. Most rides were gone.
Yeah, the
There
seats
wasn't
were
really
taken.
anything
Yeah.
left available. Yeah. So and it never even occurred to me that, that the GoDaddy car was available. It just didn't even cross my mind. So
Wow.
that call came kind of out of nowhere, and it was a pretty welcome call, certainly. And I struggled with it a little bit just because of the circumstances, and I actually reached out to Holly Weldon, Dan's sister, and we had a long chat about it, and that made me feel better about the whole thing. And
Sure.
so, yeah, when it all came around, we signed up, and I raced every race of my career from that day forward with Dan's logo on my helmet. And that was, for me, that was all. I was always driving Dan's car. That was always how I looked at it. And
Wow, that's cool.
and yeah, it was a very very fun time in my life and in my career.
Yeah, and obviously, yeah, and as you say, something a bit more attached to it than just a race car drive, which is very cool. And you say about Dan and everything. I just want to fast forward to the following year, that first win at St. Pete, and you obviously dedicated it to Dan as you're driving his car. Obviously, the year before, you had like you had a couple of podiums and eighth overall, and really steady year. But then that first win, obviously for Andretti in your words, Dan's car, must have been excuse me, must have been pretty special. Because it's not an easy circuit either, is it? It's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean to do it in Dan's hometown, his whole family was there. Holly was in town for it. My parents were there, which was super special. It's just this that first one I think is always going to be the most special because it's that moment of sort of validation. It's like everything that we did, all the sacrifices that the family made, because this is not done by one person.
No.
And all the BS you put up with, everything that goes along with it, it was all worth it in that moment. Like you thought it was worth it when you get the ride in the first place and you're an IndyCar driver, whatever. But then to go out and win at that level is so difficult, and it's just so rewarding. And yeah, that day will kind of forever be for me probably the top one, just because it was the whole family was there. Dan's family was there. It was the right place to do it. It seemed fitting.
Yeah, it just all seemed to align. The place, the car, the people, everything. It's just which was great. Great to see. And I think a lot of people don't realise that kind of backstory to that win and everything, and the people involved. So yeah, that was very cool. Again, you got some more wins at like Sao Paulo and Iowa. First one on a super speedway, which is a place you seem to do quite well at. Again, just looking at results and things like that, it was a place that you seem to take to pretty well. Did you ever sort of prefer ovals over street circuits or road courses, or was it just?
No, honestly, yeah, I loved whatever track we were driving into on a Thursday. What makes the IndyCar series so unique and I think so awesome is the variety in racetracks. If you're going to be a champion, you've got to be good at short ovals, super speedway, street courses, road courses. There's no other series that really challenges a driver like that and a team like that. So I even though I came from a road racing background, I grew to love oval racing. And I'll admit, I was not a fan of oval racing at first.
Right.
But that second year in lights, I really learned to understand them and appreciate them and respect them in a whole new light. And so for me, yeah, the places that I always seem to do well on from an oval standpoint were places where you had to maybe look after your tires a bit. You could use that second lane. I think my training in Indy Lights, because back in those days, Indy Lights cars around most of the ovals we went to, it was basically a pack race. You could run side by side, second lane, third lane, whatever. And I think you grew a stronger nerves for doing some of those moves. And so when you show up as a rookie in IndyCar, you don't know any better. And hanging around the outside at Milwaukee or Loudon or Kentucky, places like that. And it worked out well. So yeah, for me, I had a lot of fun at Iowa. It was a little boring of a racetrack, a great 2-lane race. Back in those days, huge tire degradation race. But no, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. People, because Brett seem to think it's just going around in circles, and it's so annoying. It really winds me up.
It's so much more complicated than that. I promise. I used to be one of those.
I'm trying to explain it to people, and
yeah.
I've started saying Max Verstappen has just said he doesn't do the Indy 500. I hate to say it, I think he's scared of it, that's all you need to know. Yeah, he says I don't want to risk my life doing it. So that's all you need to know. Just keep on time very quickly. Kind of inconsistent year though, a bit up and down and everything. Was that just the way the car was, just the way it? Yeah, just the way it felt. What was it?
Yeah, it wasn't a car thing. I had too many DNFs that year. Honestly, there wasn't a ton. There's certainly mistakes that I made. There are times where you don't understand what happened, but ultimately you're the guy behind the wheel, and you have to take some responsibility. We had a crash at Pocono on lap 1. I still to this day can't tell you what happened. The data couldn't tell us what happened. There was no reason the car should have spun, but it did. So that's got to be on me to a point. We got taken out of a race in Barber, and we had 3 wins, but we just had too many DNFs. It's very feast or famine. And consistency is king in this series. Wins are important, but the average finishing position of the champion is usually like 7th or something like that. So the days that win you the championships are the days where you bring home the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, because that's all it's got. That's the things that Scott Dixon's so good at. Yeah. So yeah, bit of a tough year to win 3 races but be that far down in the championship is kind of a slap in the face, to be honest.
Yeah, frustrating. Just very quickly, Greg Lady just said, "Do you miss the Milwaukee Mile?" That's a cool question.
Yeah, madly, man. I wish we were back there.
Love that.
It was just, oh man, it was such a fun track. I'd give a lot to go back there.
Yeah, agreed. It was great fun to watch it. I remember seeing it and thinking looked fun. So yeah, cool. Very quickly on 2015, back to Sam Schmidt, Peterson Motorsports. I guess it was just almost like a progression kind of thing, and you went back there. You've spoken about 2015. I mean, obviously it was a pretty solid start. You got good points in the first 3 rounds. Came to Indy. And I don't want to go into too much detail. We know what happened. You had that accident, very, very serious one, as it turned out. What do you know? What I've basically read things about it, and it says that your last memory of it was you were driving around, the sun was shining, and everything was rosy and lovely, and then it wasn't. Do you know what happened with the car, or what's your memory of
I mean, I don't remember it. I don't remember anything. I'm driving around happily. The sun is shining, as you say, and the next thing I remember is being on a hospital bed, tied down to a board and a neck brace, ventilator down my throat. A lot of very concerned people standing around me, bright lights shining in your face, and I think something may have gone wrong here. But it was the rocker on the car that failed. Basically a part of the suspension that is a particularly robust part of the car. I have never seen one fail. I have had mechanic friends in IndyCar that have done this for 30 years and have never seen one fail. Wow. So I'm sure it was some sort of, metallurgic batch issue or something like that. It's a spec component. You can't modify them. Yeah, exactly. So that's what sort of caused the initial incident. And then, it was the suspension piece piercing the tub that caused the injury. So yeah, I mean, that could have just been a sort of normal hit, but unfortunately that was not the case.
Wow. I mean, I've read about it. I don't want to go into the injuries too much, I think, but it said something came through and you basically got skewered by the suspension, basically, didn't you? And
I got hinch kebabbed,
wasn't it?
Sorry, I missed the end of it.
The issue was the blood loss, wasn't it? That was the real big thing. Because I had to take it out, obviously, but that Well,
they took it out inadvertently because they didn't know it was in. It was I was sat in the car. Sorry, I'm simultaneously trying to plug my iPad in.
Go for it. Do what you need to do.
So I was.
You're going to accelerate it.
Done. So so it sort of skewered me, as you said, and when they got to the car, I was conscious, but I couldn't really verbalize. I was fairly concussed, and I couldn't really verbalize what was wrong. So they tried to pick me up, and they said I felt quite heavy, and they thought maybe the tub had compressed in the accident, so they grabbed spreaders and tried to release some of the pressure of the tub. And I guess in doing that, the part of the suspension that had jammed into the sort of opposite side released. And so they went to pick me up and oh, okay, so that must have been it. They pick me up and then they hear this thud and they look down and they see a suspension piece sitting in the car. And it kind of took this second to be like, oh no. And there was a massive pool of blood in the bottom of the car. Because it had struck an artery in my leg when it went through. So I was just pouring out blood. And there's 100 reasons why I'm fortunate, but the one of the biggest ones is that the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is the closest proximity to a level 1 trauma center of any racetrack that we go to. Normally that kind of injury, you're firing up the chopper and you're heading off. But for this one, Methodist Hospital is 4 miles down the road, 6K down the road, on the same street even. So it's actually faster to drive than it is to take the chopper, to be honest.
Wow.
And had it not been for that proximity, because there's no blood at the racetrack, there was no blood in the ambulance, and I was just losing it at such a rate that even once I got to the hospital, They lost my pulse twice on the way up to the operating room because they got me in the ER. They couldn't figure out where all the blood was coming from. They're like, we just need to get in and figure this out. And yeah, then the elevator up to the room, they lost my pulse. So the doctor, his words, not mine. He reckoned there was about 90 seconds left before it wouldn't have been possible to bring me back. And I want to say that this is the closest. My trip to Methodist was probably conservatively 20 minutes shorter than it would have been at literally any other racetrack.
Wow. So anywhere else, we won't go into it, but
yeah.
Goodness me. I mean, we actually drove past Methodist Hospital and we hired a car. We just inadvertently drove past it. And I saw the sign and I went, I didn't realise it was that close. And as you say, the street that runs past this South Chute, isn't it? It's straight into Indianapolis. Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. I didn't realise it was that touch and go. But I mean, obviously you had like transfusions and hospital for a few days, but then obviously you got brought back and I'm very glad for that. No, thank you for talking about it. I didn't want to dwell on it for too long. And you've probably been asked about it 1,000 times. It's probably good that there's no memory on it. I think it's probably definitely
very lucky about that.
Definitely for the best. Just fast forward to the following year, back at Indy, obviously same team and kept the seat warm for you, I guess. And you took your first podium back on the road course the following year. I love the road course. It gets a bit of a bad press over here. It's like, it's just a warm up for the big one. No, it's a great circuit. I love it. That must have been great to go back there to get a podium finish and think, okay, slightly happier memory of the place. And then obviously the following event was the big one, the 500, and you put it on pole. I mean, talk about yin and yang from from one year to the next. Did you have a good feeling about the car when you were there that year? And
yeah, it's funny, we did there's always a pre-May test, and it was in April, and we went there. There'd been some aero modifications to the car per the series, and changed a pretty fundamental part of it. And we went back to that test in April, and it was the first time I'd been back to the speedway, on the speedway, and the car was undrivable. It was absolutely terrifying to drive. And, I did very poorly in the test and was very unhappy with the car. And so all these people started thinking, oh my God, he's lost it. Like, he can't do it. He's come back here. It's too fresh. It's too whatever.
I guess that's the conclusion they would automatically jump to, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an easy one to get, and I remember getting a call from my agent at the time being like, hey man, we good? Or I was like, I swear to God, it's not me. The car's garbage. Something's wrong. Like, I'm not just saying that. I don't care. I'm over it. And anyway, so like, sort of long story short, you fast forward and we got to practice week at the 500 and everything was fine. We had fixed the problem, and there was a problem on the test day, but it gave people enough time to start, talking, and things got around the paddock or whatever. And I said to my crew, because my crew largely was unchanged from the year before. And, when you a race team's a family, right? And so when you go through something like that, it's not just me that went through it. It's the whole team. And we went through that whole thing together. And I pulled them all aside at one point. I was like, here's the deal. We're going to leave May giving everybody a different story to tell about us than the one they've been telling for the last 12 months. And we go out, we get the podium on the road course, and then we go and we put it on pole. And that was enough. That was enough to kind of change the narrative a little bit and, change everybody's story of us at Indy, which was really special.
Yeah. And it must have been a cool feeling when it's confirmed, you're on pole for the 500, leading the field away. And I mean, you touched on that you got the 500 the first time you first raced in it. I mean, to be leading the field round from pole, that must have been obviously you're in race mode and but did you allow yourself to think, this is awesome? I mean, did you ever sort of allow that?
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. It's, qualifying at Indy is so unique, right? And it's something that all the teams and drivers put so much emphasis on, and there's so much of their heart and souls go into that 2 days. And it was the 100th running of the race as well. So it was a milestone event. It was the first sellout that they'd had in 20-something years. And I remember thinking I had this responsibility to make sure that the grid looked good when we came around, because that picture was probably going to be used a lot. And so like you want that spacing right, you want that pacing right, you want everything to look good. And then there's 4 pace laps in it. So once you get the first one out of the way and all the pictures are done, it's like, all right, now let's focus on the work. You admire how many people are in the stands, but yeah, it was pretty special to lead the field of green, especially at that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I forgot it was the 100th one. So yeah, obviously, yeah, you didn't win the race, unfortunately. But still, well, yeah, some other guy won, didn't he? Well, yeah, leaving, yeah, Rossi or something. Yeah,
Something like that.
but, yeah,
Some Formula One driver, I don't know.
some fella. But no, cool experience in doing that. Again, I'm just fast forwarding with time and everything. But the rest of the year was a mixed bag. But then you sort of seem to have like 2 or 3 years that were a mixed bag of things. It just didn't quite seem to click, even though the car looked good one day and then it didn't. And then was it frustrating at that time? Because obviously you proved that you got the pace at the 500. You're a front runner. You can win races. But it just didn't. Just from the outside looking in, it didn't quite look as though it all quite came together at the right time.
No, for sure. There was definitely some issues, that made it challenging, and it was very frustrating. It was very frustrating because some of them I think were a little more obvious than others, internally, and sometimes management was willing to listen, sometimes they weren't. That's again, I'll be the first. Like there were definitely times that I made mistakes, but just as a group, we were not as consistent as we should have been. We know that we had the pace when it was our day. We won some races, we fought for poles and podiums and things like that, but it was the consistency that just killed us. And I think there were some obvious reasons for it, and maybe some less obvious, but it was just tough. It was tough to get change done there. We had a bit of a revolving door at the team manager position throughout that sort of period. In 5 years of the team, I had 3.5 team managers. So that's there are things. There's a lot of people tell you continuity and consistency helps in a race team, and we were sort of lacking that a little bit. I had a bunch of different teammates over that time for various reasons. So yeah, I look back on that phase and think there was a lot of potential that didn't get realized for various reasons. But
Yeah.
Everything happens for a reason. It is what it is. I have still a ton of respect for a lot of people, in that team, that organization. A lot of the people I worked with, I loved working with, and would happily do it again one day. Others less so, but that's any business, right? That's any job you have.
Yeah, I've got the same thing at work. We've all got it. No, cool. Again, just a quick sidestep. 2019 Bathurst. You went obviously with the Walkinshaw Andretti thing. I love Bathurst. I said there's 4 things on my bucket list: Indy 500, Daytona 500, Le Mans, Bathurst, and I've done 1. But obviously it was you and Alex Rossi with the Walkinshaw Andretti thing. Everyone who's ever driven Mount Panorama loves it. What was your experience of the place?
Unreal, man. Unreal. I mean, it's the V8 supercars are a very unique car to drive. They're really tough to get that last bit of lap time out of. And trying to figure that out, having zero experience around the mountain, I was not the ideal place to do it.
That isn't where you learn, is it?
No. It took the full 1,000 before we felt even remotely comfortable with the place. Just awesome, man. Just an awesome racetrack. There's nothing quite like it. It's part street circuit, part road circuit, part hill climb. It's a little bit of everything, and the event is so cool. That's, again, I agree that should be on the bucket list. I like your bucket list. It's the same as mine. I've just got Le Mans to go. But man, it was a great experience. And it's funny, we got our asses handed to us handily, but all the guys there said, no, like you guys did a very respectable job given the circumstances. Would you come back and do it again? And I said, I mean, I would come back tomorrow, because now the hard part's done. Now you can start from this place and build from there. And Rossi was less inclined. He's like, no, man, I don't want to come back. Blah, 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 blah. No. The hard part's done. You've gone through the worst of it. It'll be so much better next time. But for whatever reason, the situation hasn't presented itself to do it again. But man, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Just keep poking him, saying, come on, let's do it. Let's go again. No, that's cool. I love that. I mean, everyone who's ever been to Bathurst says that, which is fantastic. Fast forward, I mean, a couple of seasons. I mean, 2021 last year was your final season. Did you have it in your mind that it was going to be your last season, or was it just the way it
Um,
felt?
yeah, I don't think when we started the season necessarily that was the thought, but it sort of evolved throughout the season. I mean, I knew I had more days behind me than in front of me, certainly. Um, and it was a combination of things, professional, personal, whatever, that all sort of came to a head. And it was one of those situations where um, you could look at it, you could think with your head or with your heart, and when you try to remove emotion and take the 30,000-foot view of everything, it was a very obvious decision that had to be made, and ultimately that's what I was able to do. But yeah, it's always tough, right? Like my life was IndyCar for so long, and
Yeah,
it's been a fun transition, I gotta say.
yeah.
I do feel like I made the right call and did the right thing, but yeah, there were times where it was tough and times where you sort of questioned it a little bit, but no, ultimately it was the right move.
Yeah, which is good. I mean, it's always nice when you don't sort of want to finish, you know, call it a day. But when you're comfortable with it, you think, yeah, that was the right thing to do. It kind of validates it. You feel better. And just because Nashville last year, very quickly, you raced in it. That was mad. It was the most. Some of the Brits were watching it because it was quite well publicised. Nashville street circuit, the bridge, and all that kind of thing. And a lot of Brits tuned in, and people were saying, "Is this IndyCar?" 'Cause it was. I mean, was it Marcus Ericsson went over the back of Bourdais and 7 stops and won the race, and Colton dominated it. And what was it like to drive around that place? Because it looked absolutely bonkers.
I mean, it's pretty mental to drive around. The layout itself, has some great qualities. It has some not great qualities. But man, we made ourselves look pretty stupid that day. I remember getting out of the car and I finished third. Dixon was second, and I walked up to him in pit lane. As soon as we got out of the car, helmet's still on. We're like, man, that was dumb. Like, we made ourselves look really stupid. The 2 red flags and however many caution periods and whatever. It just was, guys couldn't stay out of their own way. But the track is pretty cool. It is very unique. There's, like I said, there's a couple spots that are really awesome. I
Yeah,
think there are changes coming to the layout probably
right.
for 23. But the event was unbelievable. The people running it did an incredible job. I mean, so many fans. They stayed through the whole thing, through the entire train wreck that was that race. It was we were busy all the way to the end. It was packed, so that was great. But
Cool.
yeah, no, that was fun. It was fun for an inaugural race. Then up on the podium, that was pretty neat.
Yeah, absolutely. It was certainly a fun thing to watch. Very quick. And obviously, now you're on the other side of things. You're in the booth and everything. Personally, I think you seem to have taken to it very naturally, and I think you're very, very good at it. What do I
Well,
know?
thank you.
I've no idea, but I don't. But for me, it's very good, and you're obviously enjoying it and working with the guys there, Townsend and all the others.
No, it's been a blast, man. It's been a blast. They've made it so easy for a newbie to sort of transition into that role, and I've had some cool opportunities in the TV world in the past. Getting some experience
Hmm.
doing the international broadcasts on Champ Car when I was racing the Atlantic Series, and then when Team Canada folded on A1GP, I did a year in pit lane for them on the TV broadcast. So I've kind of had these little bits and pieces, and then worked with NBC a bit in 2020 when I was sort of on a partial season. And then, yeah, it was kind of, it's always something I've wanted to look into, post driving. And as soon as I made the decision, I kind of gave them a call and they slapped a piece of paper in front of me. They're like, yeah, let's do it. I'm like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So
Fantastic.
it's great. It's been a blast. It's been a lot of fun.
Excellent. Excellent. Good to hear. Just some comment there from Oliver Taylor. IndyCar looks stupid for one event, while F1 makes itself look stupid for an entire season.
You said it.
Yeah, moving on. I mean, there's so many things I could ask about here, but one thing that's come up in the last few days: Chip Ganassi Racing, McLaren, Alex Palou. What a mess! I mean, what's gone on now? It's just a really odd one, isn't it? And obviously, obviously, I've spoken with Alex on here, and he spoke very highly of Chip Ganassi Racing. And from what I know of Chip and everyone, they do things the right way, and it's all good. And it just seems odd that this thing was leaked or released in as a mistake, or maybe they thought it wasn't a mistake, but Alex has come out and said it was, and it's so odd, isn't it? It's a weird thing.
I don't think it was a mistake.
Yeah.
It may not have been what Alex thought was happening, but it definitely was. Everything that happened yesterday, or everything that happened the day it happened was very intentional. It's a messy situation, man. I've not seen something quite like it.
No.
And I've been involved in some weird situations in this sport.
Sure.
But yeah, honestly, like at the end of the day, wherever he ends up driving next year, what I feel bad for is for Alex. It's what should have been, a happy announcement, something that he could announce, be excited about, the fans could be excited about, is now just embroiled in this controversy and in this drama.
Yeah.
He's still in the middle of a title fight.
Is it? It's not anything to do with him.
No, I mean, no, for sure not. I mean, I don't know what part he plays in the grand scheme of it all, but he certainly wasn't in control of the press releases that were being sent out and the rest of it. So it's a tough situation. There's I guarantee you there's so much that has happened and will continue to happen behind the scenes that not only do we not know about now, we will never know about.
Yeah.
But I just hope at the end of the day, he ends up where he wants to be. He's such a good dude, such an incredible driver. And yeah, I mean, I'm partial to drivers in these situations. I've not to talk ill of team owners, but I've definitely seen and experienced some stuff that, I'm always going to side with the driver in these situations. So, like I said, I hope it works out in a way that Alex is happy and he's where he wants to be, and he can just continue on doing what he does best, which is, drive the hell out of an IndyCar.
Yeah, absolutely. Fully agree. I mean, that's, just want it resolved, and can all move forward, hopefully. Just very quickly, I wanted to finish up with some fun questions. It's been a long time. I didn't realize we've been on so long. I do apologize. Kept your time. But very quickly, was there one other series that you would have liked to have tried if you could have gone, or are you happy with your route?
I'm honestly, I'm pretty happy. Like I love the V8s. I love the opportunity to have done Bathurst, and I did the Gold Coast race one time. I would love to test an F1 car. There's certain things about F1 I struggle with, as a competitor, but there's no doubt the machines are just incredible. And, I can't wait to, talk Colton's ear off when I see him in Toronto. But no, honestly, man, for me, I grew up in Toronto, which is a city that had an IndyCar race. When I was like really kind of starting to understand it and get into it, Jacques Villeneuve was winning IndyCar races. And so that was really always the goal for me. And I'm so fortunate that I was able to spend, 11 seasons, racing where I wanted to race.
Fantastic. Love it. If you could pick one, Indy 500 or IndyCar Championship, which one would you want to win? 500.
It's 500. So, and you know what? 10 years ago, I would have said championship.
Right.
I used to think that was the stupidest answer. I'm like, oh, so one race you get lucky and you win, but like winning a championship is so much harder in the grand scheme of things. And it is. I still maintain that, but it doesn't matter. Like I said before, there's just something about that race that I used to think was just put on by all the drivers that were interviewed, but there's something special about it. I'd take a 500.
Yeah, absolutely. No one said the championship yet. Favorite circuit you've ever driven on, ever raced on?
Oh man, I mean, it's a tough one. Honestly, like for me, Road America is one of the best tracks that you can go race on. Yeah. And I've raced there, and everything from Formula BMW to an IndyCar, sports cars, other junior Formula cars. It's just so special. There's a lot of tracks I haven't been to that might usurp Road America if I ever get the chance, but for now, it's all right.
Yeah, cool. And this is the impossible question that I always end on. Obviously, I've spoken to loads, quite a few people, and there's just a myriad of different answers. Who's the best driver that you have raced against or with? Is there one that stands out, makes you think he was pretty special?
Yeah, well, I'll give you two because one's obvious, and then I'll give you a more obscure one. the obvious one is Scott Dixon.
Oh,
He, you know, and it's funny, like if you didn't know he had won so many championships and you just kind of got to race against him the odd weekend here or there, you'd still say the same thing. I mean, his ability to bring it home, to maximize whatever it is that car, that team, that package has on that day is second to none. There's really no area of his game that is weak, and most areas of his game are exceptionally strong. So, in my career, yeah, I mean, Scott stands out. Dario obviously stands out in a lot of ways, but the kind of more obscure answer for me is Hulkenberg.
wow.
I got to race against him in A1, and what was so cool about A1 is it was a spec series, right? I mean, everybody had the same gear, and the year, I want to say it was season 2 that he won the championship. There were a couple performances that year where, unless it like comes out down the road that the team was somehow cheating like phenomenally, the some of the performances out of him that year were absolutely stunning. Single lap qualifying, some of the wet performances, like just the little, like the things that you look for that are kind of like, oh yeah, this sort of evens the playing field a little bit. Nico was exceptional, and I'm very happy he had a nice long career in F1. I wish it had been longer and more successful, because I promise you it wasn't from talent. That guy was immensely talented.
That's awesome. I love that answer, because the amount of people that say, "Oh, we never got a podium, he can't be any good," well, that's just ridiculous. I mean, yeah,
that's not it. I promise you, that's not it.
Yeah. So glad you've said that. And just go at Scott Dixon. He is the most criminally underrated driver over here in Europe. I mean, after half an hour of the Indy 500 this year, I thought, well, he's going to win. It was just so unfortunate what happened, but he was just incredible to watch.
He got a test with Williams, I want to say in 05 or 6, something like that. And I still think, man, if he had that opportunity, he could have really, really excelled. Just his approach, his driving style, all the things, that make Scott great. I really do think I think he could have really excelled in Formula One, and it's a shame he never got that. Selfishly for us, it was great, but but it would have been cool to see.
Yeah, and he's done pretty well. I mean, he's
it's worked out okay. Yeah, I'm not worried about where his next meal's coming from.
He'll be fine. Yeah, that's fantastic. It's been an hour and 40 minutes. It's flown by. Sorry to have taken up so much of your time, but we're going to wrap it up there. First, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's tuned in. I just want to say to Jim McKendrick, it was his birthday, so happy birthday, Jim, if you're still tuning in, and enjoy the pizza.
Happy birthday, Jim.
Thank you to everyone for tuning in, and obviously to you, James, thank you so much for coming and having a chat. It's been brilliant. It's flown by, which is always a good sign. So thank you very, very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And again, thanks everyone for tuning in. Really appreciate it, guys.
Great stuff. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. And stay tuned. Cheers, James. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.